The Halo community seems to be in a perpetual state of it's so over and we're so back. But I truly don't think we've ever been more back than what we are right now, and I believe a Halo renaissance is upon us. In today's video, I'm going to be providing a very brief summary of Halo's history, while going over the series' rise, and what some would argue is the downfall of the IP. So without wasting any more of your time, let's jump straight in. So before we can talk about Halo's rise, let's rewind the clock back to 1999. It's July 21st and Halo gets unveiled for the very first time. The presentation blew people away, but this wouldn't end up being the Halo game that we all came to play, as things would take a drastic change. Halo had a very interesting development cycle. The game shifted genres and themes many times, as it took Bungie a while to really decide on what they wanted to go for. And it wasn't until later when they'd struck a deal with Microsoft that Halo would become Halo Combat Evolved and would launch with the original Xbox console. Combat Evolved was of course a huge success. It's the game that really put Xbox on the map, and allowed them to compete in the big leagues against competitors like Nintendo and Sony. Halo was in fact so popular and so successful that Bungie decided to do something that they never usually do, which was of course make a sequel. Halo 2, just like its predecessor, had a very interesting development cycle, as the game was made in around about 10 months. And a lot of people would argue that it's even better than the first. Halo 2 is tied for my favourite game of all time, and it's one of the first games I ever remember playing. Now, I'd say that Halo 2 is of course a contender for one of the greatest games of all time. I believe it does improve upon Combat Evolved in a multitude of ways, and although CE is the father of the series, the reason Xbox took off as a brand, and is famous for its spectacular LAN parties, Halo 2 is really the catalyst for Xbox Live, and the reason that that became as successful as it did. With the second title, however, this was the first time where the community really started to butt heads. Believe it or not, but there was many fans who weren't a fan of the Arbiter when he first appeared, and this actually led to him having a smaller role in the story for Halo 3. Though he is the second controllable character, his story presence is very clearly much lower than it was in Halo 2, where just as much of the game focused on him as it did the Master Chief, and in fact it's the Arbiter you play as in the final level of the game. Halo 2 ends with one of the coolest cliffhangers in a video game, another thing which people were mixed on at the time. But this cliffhanger of course led us straight into Halo 3, which is the game that is tied with Halo 2 for my favourite video game of all time. Halo 3 basically takes everything special about the first two games and mixes them together to create a very climactic finale for this first trilogy. There is of course an argument that the narrative of Halo 3 isn't as good as Halo 2, and this is a notion I would agree with. However, at the same time, I still think Halo 3 has potentially the most enjoyable campaign of the series. Halo 3's campaign also ended with a pretty sizable cliffhanger, with Master Chief and Cortana being stranded on the wreckage of the Forward Unto Dawn, believed to be dead. But I do think this was the right ending for the game. It left it open for potential sequels, but still felt like a very fitting end to this saga. As for Halo 3's multiplayer, as we all know, it was pretty damn legendary. This, I would say, is where custom game modes really started to take shape and would of course evolve even more over time. Now, from here, Halo would see a few different spin-offs. There was a few side stories to tell before we picked up with the main journey, and the first of these is of course Halo Wars. Halo Wars, being the first spin-off title, takes quite a departure from the FPS game style that we were used to. The title was instead an RTS, which interestingly Halo was originally going to be. Halo Wars ended up becoming a bit of a cult classic. The Halo universe lends itself so well to this style of game, which paired up with its amazing story, fun characters, and breathtaking soundtrack, it's no wonder that this title is loved by fans. But Halo Wars was swiftly followed up by Halo 3 ODST, a game that in a lot of ways does feel like it should have just been a DLC for the third Halo installment. That being said, ODST still manages to be an amazing experience. Just like everything that's come before it, it was a lot of fun, had a really engaging narrative, and introduced us to some new characters like Buck, who would become immediate fan favourites. This was also the introduction of Firefight, though this does come at the cost of ODST not having a traditional multiplayer game mode, but despite that fact, this is still many people's favourite Halo game. The next game is of course one we're all extremely familiar with. It's a game that just recently had its 15-year anniversary, but is also a title that caused one of the first major divides within the Halo community, and that is of course Halo Reach. One thing that was quite funny in regards to Halo Reach is it was actually a large selling point for Halo 3 ODST, as purchasing the Halo 3 spin-off would give you beta access to Reach. When the prequel finally landed, as expected, it was a huge success, once again introducing us to a cast of new characters and helping flesh out events we hadn't yet seen in a game. Reach's fall was absolutely heartbreaking, and this stands out as one of the more tragic stories in a Halo title. But despite Reach providing an incredibly cinematic experience, it also introduced a lot of elements that fans really weren't too keen on. Reach, though providing a relatively traditional experience overall, introduced things like Sprint, which caused a massive debate within the community about whether or not this is something that belonged in Halo. Some people also weren't massively keen on the more gritty, realistic art style. Though Halo has always had dark themes, it's always still retained a lot of colour, but Reach trades this out for a more muted approach, which made it blend in at the time with games like Modern Warfare. Reach was also the introduction of loadouts in a Halo title. Though you couldn't customize these yourself, you could mess around with them in custom games. But alongside this, Reach massively expanded upon Forge, a level editor that was introduced in Halo 3, with Reach's version being much larger. And this is definitely one of the highlights of the game, and one of the main factors why so many people adore this title. Now, I don't personally think that Reach is the best Halo game, but it is one of the ones that I have the most nostalgia for. I used to play this game all of the time. With some of my cousins and friends, we would sit there playing really dumb custom games like Teach It or Get Out of My House. And despite my less than positive feelings towards Reach's multiplayer, Reach has attributed to some of my most positive and memorable experiences in a video game. A couple of years later, Reach would be followed up with Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary. And CEA overall, considering it was there to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of the series, was quite a letdown. It was certainly a very interesting remaster, as you could switch between the classic and remastered visuals. But unlike most remastered games where it's usually just upscaled graphics, CEA basically has a new visual style built on the bones of the original. But the biggest disappointment of this title for me was the fact that its multiplayer was just a DLC for Halo Reach. But this would basically mark the end of the Bungie era. Now, I should clarify, Bungie aren't the ones that made Combat Evolved Anniversary, but as it is a tie-in to Halo Reach, this is where I really mark the end of that era of games, as Bungie would end their relationship with Microsoft and move on to new ventures, as the reins to Halo were handed over to 343 Industries, the new company that Microsoft had made to pioneer the future of the Halo series. But before we talk about that future, let's take a bit of a detour to talk about some of the smaller Halo spin-off titles. These do all fall under the 343 era, but due to them not being as widely available, and overall much less impactful than the rest of the series, I thought it made sense to talk about these ones here, which of course include Spartan Assault, Spartan Strike, and Halo Fireteam Raven. Both Spartan Assault and Spartan Strike are quite similar to one another. They are both top-down shooters adopting a similar visual style to Halo Wars, but both of these were essentially designed to be mobile games, though Spartan Assault can be played on console. Spartan Strike is actually the only Halo game I have never actually played, but it is something I've been meaning to check out. I think originally it was only available on iOS platforms. As for Fireteam Raven, this is of course the arcade game, which shares a very similar visual style to Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary, which makes sense given the events of Fireteam Raven do coincide with the very first game. Master Chief even has a couple of cameo appearances throughout the adventure. Fireteam Raven is definitely nothing groundbreaking as far as arcade shooters go, but I still think it's a lot of fun, and every single time I go on holiday and I walk past a Fireteam Raven cabinet, I have to give it a try. Even though I've already completed the game, it's just something that's always cool to see. I do think it would be nice to see Fireteam Raven receive some kind of console release. I'm not entirely sure how it would work, though I do think it would be really cool to see it released on maybe the Nintendo Switch, alongside some kind of gun accessory that you can slot the Joy-Cons into to give it a more authentic feeling. And though I do believe that receiving some kind of home release would definitely make its appearance in arcades feel a bit less special, I also know that its presence in those arcades probably isn't going to last forever. And I think players deserve a way to be able to play that game from the comfort of their homes. But on that note, I think it's time to pick up and see how things are going with the Master Chief and Cortana, as next we're talking about Halo 4. Though this is the fourth mainline entry in the series, this was 343's first outing with the IP. Now, I do believe it's worth noting that Bungie were allegedly less than friendly when handing over the keys to the Halo series to this new studio, which did make development a little bit troublesome in regards to handling the engine. Now, I could talk for hours about Halo 4's development cycle, and I know there's a few things that people will bring up, such as the fact that 343 supposedly wanted to hire people that hated Halo, and this isn't really accurate, with this coming from a very poorly worded quote, but the intention was just more so to bring people in who could bring some new ideas to the table, to make Halo feel fresh, to make the Halo that they also want. And I don't really think that's a bad thing. I don't think bringing fresh ideas to the series is in any way a negative. I mean, we've just seen plenty of fresh ideas that got introduced with Halo Reach, things that were new to the series. They had also supposedly tried to recast Steve Downes and Jen Taylor as Master Chief and Cortana. This is something that gets brought up a lot within their Halo fandom, and it's something I'm very glad that didn't happen. I don't think anyone could play these characters as well as those two actors. But at the same time, I do think it's silly that it's almost been 15 years since Halo 4 had released, and yet this argument still gets brought up. But anyways, to talk about the game itself, Halo 4's story I think was really good. It did a lot to humanize the Master Chief, which we had seen elements of in the prior entries. This wasn't a new concept. The Master Chief had already started to evolve past that vessel for the player and become his own character. And I'm a big fan of how his relationship was handled with Cortana in this title, and I do think that it is an absolute standout from this entry. I think the campaign itself was still a lot of fun across the board. There's some really cool set pieces and segments, like using the Mantis for the first time, and regardless of what your thoughts on the human Forerunner debate are, I still think the Didact entrance was so unbelievably cool. I remember before I had the chance to play Halo 4, my dad was playing through the game with my mother and my uncle, and they'd reached the part where the Didact was introduced, and my dad called for me to come to the room, and seeing the cutscene where the Didact is introduced, I was blown away. One thing I do appreciate is that Halo 4 dropped the gritty aesthetic that was introduced in Halo Reach and went back to the more brighter color palette we'd seen in other entries. That being said, I'm not a massive fan of the Halo 4 and 5 art style. I don't think it's bad, and over the years I've come accustomed to it. There is a lot of designs within Halo 4 and 5's art style that I think look really cool, and I honestly think this style would have been appreciated more if Chief had still woken up in his Halo 3 armor, with him maybe receiving a new suit when he regroups with the Infinity. Halo 4's multiplayer I also think was quite solid. The best way I can describe how Halo 4 feels is it is almost like Halo Reach 2.0, and I know a lot of people are going to get a little bit angry at me saying that, but I think everything that Halo 4 does, it only does because it was introduced in Halo Reach. Sprint is in Halo 4, a lot of people didn't like that, but Sprint probably wouldn't be there if it wasn't already introduced in the prior title. Now, if we're going to have Sprint, I prefer how Halo 4 handles it as opposed to Reach. I don't like Sprint being an equipment, I'd rather it wasn't in the game at all, because without Sprint in Halo Reach, the game feels really slow. Loadouts, again, something that is in Halo 4, was something that initially appeared in Halo Reach, and I don't think Halo 4 would have had these things if they weren't there prior. Now, Halo 4 expands upon some of these concepts, maybe too much, but I think the argument that Halo 4 is too similar to Call of Duty is just untrue. If you play any COD game and play Halo 4, these two games are not similar whatsoever. I do think it's disappointing that Halo 4 didn't have a traditional firefight, instead being swapped out for Spartan Ops. I like Spartan Ops, but it isn't as customizable and definitely isn't as replayable as the former. Its Forge mode, although almost being a carbon copy of the one present in Reach, also didn't feel as enjoyable, and I don't know if that's just because of the lack of something like Forge World, with Halo 4 instead having its Forge Islands, and some of the Halo 4 objects just looking a bit more boring in comparison. Halo 4's Infection mode was really cool. I think it was a creative new take on a very popular mode, with the infected actually being the Flood. But again, this came at the cost of the lack of customization in the mode, as you couldn't actually change the weapons that the Flood used. But Halo 4 caused quite a divide. There were some people that really loved this new approach, that loved this new visual style, the expansion on the Forerunner lore, and some of the new characters and dynamics that were introduced. But on the other end of the spectrum, there is people that still absolutely hate it. There are still some people that would argue it is the worst thing to ever happen to the IP. and I do think this is a little bit dramatic, Halo 4 isn't a bad game. It's pretty damn solid. Is it as good as the original trilogy? No. But I would personally hold it on a very similar level to Halo Reach. I don't have as much nostalgia for Halo 4, but I think both games are pretty damn good in their own way. I think there are some things that Halo 4 does better, and I think there are some things that Reach does better. Now, not too long after the 4th entry, a new anniversary came up, this being Halo 2 Anniversary, and it arrived with a collection. The Master Chief Collection. This was the first Halo title for the Xbox One, and when it launched, it was a mess. But still, I vividly remember coming home from school on the day that it had launched, and playing Halo 2 Anniversary multiplayer for the first time, and it was so cool. The game was janky as hell, it barely worked, but man, I had a huge soft spot for it. Honestly, the biggest letdown for me was how limited the customization was, how everything was a preset and you couldn't individually change your armor. But Master Chief Collection is a game that grew and developed even further over time, with it getting a huge revival when it was brought to PC. When it launched, both Halo 3 ODST and Halo Reach weren't a part of the collection, but this was later changed. And Master Chief Collection has improved so much, as it's received a ton of new content over time. Combat Evolved received expanded customization, Halo Reach received items that were cut from the base game, Halo 3 got the most out of everything, receiving brand new maps, a ton of new armor, for both Spartans and Elites. Even weapons that were previously only available in Halo 3 ODST were added to Halo 3's multiplayer and Forge. People often talk about getting some kind of Halo 3 remaster or Halo 3 Anniversary, and within Master Chief Collection we already have it. It checks pretty much every box for it to be a remaster, with it having improved visuals, and even goes beyond typical remaster standards by having a ton of additional content that wasn't in the base game itself. Halo 2 Anniversary itself I've always thought was pretty solid. It is a significant improvement over Combat Evolved Anniversary. The multiplayer is a remake, and the campaign takes the same remastered approach that CEA did, but much better, especially with the addition of those blur cutscenes that look absolutely gorgeous. MCC also allowed players beta access to Halo 5 Guardians, the next mainline game. Halo 5, just like Halo 4, had a very mixed response. It still carried over the same art style, which a lot of fans were displeased about. Halo 5 also introduced rec packs, and this was during the age of loot boxes in video games. Now this kinda sucked, especially for the progression. Pretty much everything was behind a rec pack. You could unlock these for free, and to be fair, they weren't super difficult to grind for, but you could speed up the process by spending money. This definitely wouldn't be as much of an issue if it was purely for cosmetics. However, Halo 5 introduced a brand new game mode, Warzone, which was a big PvPvE experience where two teams of 12 would butt heads, trying to capture bases and fighting the Covenant or Prometheans along the way. Warzone I still think is potentially the best mode we have ever had in a Halo game, but you do have to ignore the microtransaction side. I think the way that the rec system works in a match is pretty solid, and the concept of calling in different power weapons and vehicles at your base was really fun. But of course, people that had brought rec packs would be at a significant advantage as opposed to those that didn't. On the campaign front, Halo 5's story I do think is one of the weaker ones in the series. It's not necessarily what I would have hoped for in a follow-up to Halo 4, though a lot of the story does revolve around Master Chief. You barely actually see or play as him, with him only being playable I think in 3 of the 15 missions. The game more so focuses on a new character, Agent Locke, who was introduced just a little bit prior in the Halo Nightfall series. Locke had a new team of Spartans. It was himself, Spartan Vale, Tanaka, and the return of Buck, who was now a Spartan himself. Chief also had his own team, which consisted of himself, Fred, Linda, and Kelly, with this team consisting of Spartan 2s. Now, despite the fact that I do think the story of this game is weaker, I still think the campaign is a lot of fun. There was once again some really cool gameplay moments. I think visiting St. Helios and seeing the return of the Arbiter was awesome. Fighting things like the Hydra or sliding down the back of a Guardian. I mean, yeah dude, this game might just be hype moments and aura, but it has hype moments and aura. Its gameplay was certainly different, but it wasn't alien. I would still play Halo 5 and I could tell that it was a Halo game I was playing. And that wasn't just because that's what it told me on the box. But after Halo 5, we go back to another spin-off, this being Halo Wars 2. A sequel to Halo Wars had been sought after for an unbearably long time, and the fact that we finally had one was insane. It was also really significant as it marked the return of the Brutes. an enemy type which hadn't been seen since Halo Reach. So it had been over half a decade at this point since we'd fought against a brute. But now they were in a leading role, with them serving as the primary antagonist. But this wasn't the Covenant anymore, we were fighting the Banished. Halo Wars 2 overall is a pretty solid sequel to the first. The gameplay was still really fun, and it had some really cool cinematics, another super engaging story, and it was nice just seeing more of the Spirit of Fire characters that we'd grown to love since the first game. Halo Wars 2 did introduce this really weird new game mode called Blitz, and this also had its own loot pack system. It was still during that era of games. The best way I can describe Blitz is it's basically Halo Wars meets Clash Royale, and I think this concept would work incredibly well as a mobile game, but not so much in Halo Wars, or at least in a Halo Wars console title. Anyways, after Halo Wars 2, the Halo series would see the biggest break between game releases that it ever had, as we all very impatiently awaited the release of Halo Infinite. When Infinite was revealed for the first time, Halo fans lost their minds. Originally, people were excited just over the fact that it seemed like it was going for a more classic art style. The original reveal trailer was so mysterious and vague, but felt so incredibly Halo, and every trailer that came out after that just built up hype and anticipation even more. Before Infinite would release, players got access to the Flights, which were essentially little multiplayer trials, where players could try out the new bot system that was established. This gave people a brief taste of Halo Infinite's multiplayer to get used to its gameplay, and eventually these bot flights did turn into actual PvP, with players getting to try arena multiplayer and big team battle. Halo Infinite then released in its beta state on November 15th, 2021. And when it launched, people loved it. That's not to say it was perfect, of course, it was a beta, it had issues. But the game really resonated with fans. This was the Halo experience that people had been dying for. The gameplay felt new, but familiar. So now all we were waiting for was the full release. And then on December 8th of the same year, it came. But the only thing that really launched was the campaign. There was no additional content for the multiplayer, which was bizarre, but we had the campaign, so it was okay. And again, when it came out, people loved it. Both the campaign and multiplayer initially had really positive reviews. It seemed like for the first time in a very long time, the community was united once again. But after a while, things started to take a turn for the worst. Halo Infinite is of course a live service title, but for the first few months that live service wasn't really present, as the amount of content that was released was few and far between. Big Team Battle was broken for the first couple of months, and Season 2 got delayed, so with the game not launching with things like Forge, Infection, Juggernaut, people got bored really quickly. Now, eventually things did turn around for Halo Infinite. It got all of those requested modes, and today the game is so much better. It has new sandbox additions, a wide variety of dev and Forge made maps. It's got some crazy fun game modes, a ton of armor, and plenty of ways to unlock some of it. Everything that people expected the game to have day one is there now, but unfortunately it was a matter of too little too late. By the time the Infinite really started to get rolling, a lot of people had already made their minds up on the game, and had a less than positive opinion on it. Is Halo Infinite perfect? Of course not. Just like almost any game, it has issues. It's definitely not my favourite in the series, but at the same time I do adore this game. If Infinite didn't exist, I don't think I would have the platform I have now, and I wouldn't have met some of the incredible people I've met in the Halo community through making videos on this title. I've made so many friends through Infinite, and I will be eternally thankful for that. And now that our little history lesson is over, we're brought back up to date with the present. Halo has recently been the star of various video game collabs. It had a second wave of items released in Fortnite, with the first wave being just before Infinite came out, back in 2020, where the Master Chief released as a store item, alongside his Gravity Hammer pickaxe and a variety of other things. But we had a second wave, a Halo Mark 7 Spartan, that was released in the newest Battle Pass. But there's been even more Halo items released in Fortnite since then, including a new emote and a drum set. And though the Fortnite collab with Halo was pretty cool, it's not even the biggest Halo collab that has happened this year, as Halo has also made an appearance in Helldivers 2, as that game was brought over to Xbox. Now this is a collab that fans had been clamoring for since Helldivers 2 released. There was clearly a lot of similarities between the divers and the ODSTs of the Halo franchise, and people wanted to see these two things come together in some capacity. Helldivers 2 launched a ODST themed war bond, which gave you an ODST set of armor and the recon set worn by Dare in Halo 3 ODST. There was also a variety of weapons, including the assault rifle, suppressed SMG, tactical magnum, and the shotgun. This was a really cool collab, and not only did it massively benefit Helldivers, but a lot of people were talking about Halo again. Now this little resurgence has come at a very interesting time. The Halo World Championship is just around the corner, and Halo Studios have been teasing something big. Although I said we're caught up, I did actually miss out one crucial detail, and that was last year's Halo World Championship. 343 had a video to show off, announcing that they were moving development of Halo to Unreal Engine, so they could now focus on being a video game company exclusively and not needing to worry about programming an engine. They've been working with Epic Games to create a modified version of Unreal that better suits the Halo series. And of course they announced that they rebranded to Halo Studios. This all seemed really exciting. They showed off Project Foundry, which is like a tech demo of sorts, so they could try and get the visual style of Halo into Unreal, and it looked really impressive. This immediately started speculation on the prospect of a Combat Evolved remake. I mean, they specifically used the Mark V armor in this showcase. It is a modified version of the one that was seen in Halo Infinite's multiplayer, but there's also some new assets like a brand new version of the Combat Evolved Magnum. Now Halo Studios have confirmed they will have a follow-up to this video presentation this year at this year's World Championship, which will be the very last one for Halo Infinite. Tickets have sold out for the event and they've made sure to promise that it will be big, though I won't be attending it myself. Some of my Halo friends that you might be familiar with, like Halo Bug Studios, Spylens, Yellow Mellow, and more, will be in attendance. Even Sergeant Blair's going. But it seems like the studio is gearing up to reveal something big. Now, we don't know for sure what this is going to be. The implication is that it's going to be a game reveal. However, it's really too soon to confirm that. But Halo's 25th anniversary is next year. During this year's Xbox showcase, Phil Spencer alluded to the return of a game that has been with us since the beginning. They then followed this up by the Call of Duty Black Ops 6 or 7 reveal. I really don't care enough to remember. But still, the way he worded this very much sounded like they were alluding to a Halo title. Halo Studios has reiterated multiple times they are working on multiple games. And I do believe we're going to get our first glimpse at maybe one, maybe more of these titles next month at the World Championship. Now, I say a Halo renaissance or a revival is upon us, but truthfully, in order to revive something, it had to have died. And in going over this history of the Halo series, I mean, let's be frank, it's never really gone anywhere. Sometimes people lose interest, that's going to happen, especially in the modern video game landscape, where new titles release pretty much every day. Halo has more competition now than ever, and the video game horizon is much broader than it's ever been. But I do genuinely mean it when I say that I think we are so back. It's a very exciting time to be a Halo fan. Even though we don't know what the future of the series is, we've been able to find enjoyment in some of the recent collaborations, and I'm sure there'll be plenty more of those too. Halo is my favourite video game series, and I truly cannot wait to see where it's going to go in its next chapter. But on that note, I think it's time to wrap this one up. I feel like I've spent longer talking about the history of Halo than I really intended to. This video was originally just going to be a brief summary of the recent collaborations, and how I think there's going to be something exciting at this World Championship. But in reality, it ended up turning into more of a Halo history lesson. A way, I suppose, for me to reminisce on the past of this series, while we gear up for whatever the future holds. Whether or not this next game is going to be a remake, a new installment, or even a spin-off, I can guarantee I will be there day one. But anyways, thank you for listening to me yap for an unbearably yacht. Hopefully this video has maybe reinvigorated your hope in the series, or even just allowed you to reminisce on the past. Anyways, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one.